Hey everyone, Couch Investor back to another earnings report video. So, Block reported earnings, beat on earnings per share and revenue estimates. Stock at the time of making this video, even though it's irrelevant these days, up to around 3 to 4%. Apple also reported earnings. As always, they knocked it out of the park. They also announced a $90 billion buyback. Obviously, we had Alphabet announce a $70 billion. Apple came out $90 billion buyback. Incredible. Anyways, for Block, to my surprise, it was actually a pretty good report, especially if you look at gross profit growth for Cash App and also for the overall business. I think the market is still looking at, or maybe wants to hear a bit more about the cost cuts, let's say, because this company hasn't really done that much when it comes to that side of things. Maybe during the call a bit more about the short seller reports, right? The trust issues, let's call it. Didn't write anything in the earnings in the shareholder letter. We've talked about their response already in another video. If you want to check that out, it's going to be in the top right corner. But overall, most of the information that you need, if not all the information, is already in the earnings report. As always, if something extraordinary gets mentioned in the earnings call, for example, Jack Dorsey stepping down, finger crossed, you never know, then I'll write it in a community post. So without further ado, if you enjoy this type of videos, leave it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you have not, would really help me out. Trying to reach 30,000 subscribers by the end of this year. We're well on our way. And if you want to support me even further, do check out the link down in the description and in the pinned comment to get the top 10 best stocks to buy now, or go to fool.com/couchinvestor. So let's start with the highlights. So gross profit for the overall business increased 32% year over year to $1.71 billion. So again, continues the nice trend upwards. Cash App gross profit, this is, to be honest, this was surprising. Increased 49% year over year and closing in on $1 billion. Would not surprise me if we reach that next quarter. Really tremendous business. Square gross profit increased 16% year over year to $770 million. That side of the business, as you will see with GPV or GMV as well, a bit of a slowdown quarter over quarter, but overall the growth there continues. And yes, with the high inflationary environment right now, this was bound to happen. But there is also good news, especially when you look at outside of the United States, the growth there, pretty good. At least it's getting better and better. As for operating income, again, this is always like a roller coaster. If you look at adjusted operating income, that's positive, sometimes negative, sometimes positive. It really has to stabilize at some point. Now, operating income in this case, still a loss, $6 million there. When you look at net income, also still a loss, $17 million there. Big improvements from Q4, of course. Then adjusted EBITDA that increased 89% year over year to $368 million. Now, if that's enough for you, those are the highlights for this earnings report. If that's enough, be my guest. You can click away. But if you want more information about Cash App, Cash Cards, and all of that, we're going to have a look at that right now. So in March, there were 20 million monthly Cash App card active, up 34% year over year, with average spend per active increasing as well. They also reached 53 million Cash App monthly transacting actives. I believe the last number we got last quarter was 51 million, so they increased 2 million there. Finally, we get consistency with the numbers being reported, because before we had a couple of quarters where we just were flying blind. They continue by saying here in March there were 2 million direct deposit actives and paycheck deposit totaled $2.5 billion, up 69% year over year. Now, of course, with everything that's happening with banks, etc., direct deposits inflows in maybe companies like Square, Cash App ecosystems, SoFi, as we've seen, and especially Apple as well, was bound to happen. Now, when it comes to expanding globally, so gross profit in markets outside of the United States is now $122 million, 16% of Square gross profit. I believe last quarter was 12%, I believe it was. So nice increase there. In the first quarter, gross profit in markets outside the United States grew 43% year over year and represented 16% of Square gross profit. And we experienced strong product adoption, particularly among mid-market sellers, which, by the way, you can see right here, Square GPV mix by seller size. This is obviously not internationally, but this is for the rest of the business. So you can see that right here. And then of course you cannot have an earnings report without the mention of generative artificial intelligence. So that's exactly what we've got in this report. So basically they say they've been launching features and leveraging machine learning and generative AI for years, but in 2023 they did it a bit more. They say here suggested actions complement our previously launched generative AI powered suggested replies. Since launch, more than 400,000 sellers have accepted and sent more than 1 million suggested replies or actions. We also launched AI-generated item descriptions as part of the Square for Retail's item creation flow. Since launch, approximately 3 out of 4 suggested item descriptions are saved without edits, which means that these AI capabilities can help make commerce easier and give sellers time back. Again, this is about doing more with less. Now, when we look at revenue, they say our total net revenue was just under $5 billion, so $499 billion in the first quarter of 2023, up 26% year over year. Now, if you exclude Bitcoin revenue in the first quarter was $2.83 billion, up 27% year over year. And as always, Bitcoin gross profits still is just 2% of Bitcoin revenue. Now, one thing I want to point out here is that subscription and services-based revenue was $1.37 billion in the first quarter, up 42% year over year, and subscription and services-based gross profit was $1.1 billion, up 42% year over year. Of course, we all like to see subscription rise as well because it's more predictable, stickier as well. Hopefully this continues, but I like what I'm seeing so far. Then when we look at Cash App, the ecosystem. So in the first quarter, Cash App generated $3.27 billion of revenue and $931 million of gross profit, up 33% and 49% year over year respectively. Excluding Bitcoin revenue, Cash App revenue was $1.11 billion. That's up 52% year over year. So you can see here, Cash App inflows, $61 billion, a 27% growth year over year. And then the Square ecosystem, as I said at the start of this video, we see here decline quarter over quarter from Q3 to Q1 went from 50 billion to 46.2 billion, but still we grew 17% year over year. They say here that Square generated $1.67 billion of revenue and $770 million of gross profit, up 15 and 16% year over year respectively. Now, if you exclude gross profit attributable to the PPP loan forgiveness, Square gross profit was up 26% year over year. And by the way, they also mentioned here with regards to Square GPV in the United States market that grew 14% year over year, and growth in the international market was 33% year over year. On a constant currency basis, Square GPV in the international markets was up 44%. Music to my ears. Now, when we look at operating expenses, that was $1.72 billion on a GAAP basis, which is down from $1.80 billion in the previous quarter. So a bit of an improvement there, but in my opinion, not really enough. And probably this will continue over time. Remember, they talked about the rule of 40, but don't expect this to happen pretty soon. Now, as we look at the trend and forward-looking commentary, gross profit in April 2023 grew 24% year over year. The combined company gross profit, which includes now the buy now, pay later, grew 24% year over year. Now, as for operating expenses for Q2 on a non-GAAP basis, that will increase $200 million quarter over quarter. Again, like I said, the issue here is getting expenses under control. And since this is a Jack Dorsey business, he doesn't like to do more with less. He wants to do less with more. Now, as for outlook for 2023, so for the full year adjusted EBITDA, a bit higher than the previous guidance that they gave us, 1.36 billion, up from 1.3. Then adjusted operating income, which is a loss in this case, $115 million instead of $150 million. So to conclude, this quarter was a good one, beat my own expectations as well, but my only issue here is getting costs under control. This type of business can probably be extremely profitable if they actually do what every other tech company has done in recent months. Cost cuts, streamline the business. How come every other company can do it, but Square can't or is not willing to do it? I know they have plans with the rule of 40, etc., etc. But a business like this probably can do a lot more with less. I mean, we've seen this with Twitter as well. Maybe they'll mention something during the earnings call. If so, I'll be sure to pin it in the pinned comment, create a community post as well, so stay tuned for that. Do share your thoughts down in the comments below as well. If you enjoy this type of videos, leave it a thumbs up, subscribe if you have not, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye.